The air in the boardroom on the 42nd floor always smelled the same. A sterile blend of lemon polish, cooled recirculated air, and the metallic tang of fear. I had spent 15 years learning to breathe that air, learning to navigate the currents of power that flowed through the hallways of Sterling Heart like electricity. I was the senior liaison for strategic partnerships. It was a title that sounded boring to the uninitiated. To anyone who actually knew how money moved in the city, it meant I held the keys to the kingdom. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. My power was in the silence between signatures, in the nod across a mahogany table, in the $3 billion merger. I had spent the last 9 months sculpting from a block of chaotic raw data into a masterpiece of corporate synergy. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, reviewing the final clauses on my tablet. The doors slammed open. It wasn't just an entrance, it was an invasion. Cassidy, the newly appointed VP's daughter, clacked into the room. She was 24 years old, armed with a freshly printed MBA that her father had likely paid a building wing for, and wearing a smirk that suggested she thought she was the main character in a movie everyone else was just lucky to be extras in. It was her first day. Literally, her first hour. "Excuse me." Voice cut through the hum of the office like a serrated knife. She wasn't looking at the view, she was looking at me. Or rather, she was looking at my torso. I lowered the tablet slowly, turning to face her with the practiced neutrality I used for erratic investors. "Can I help you, Cassidy? I'm Emily. We were supposed to meet at, I know who you are," she interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. She was holding a thick, spiral-bound book, the employee handbook, relic from the 90s that nobody had actually opened since the invention of the iPhone. "And I know what you're doing. Reviewing the merger protocols for the Sterling deal?" I offered, keeping my voice level. "No," she sneered, stepping closer. She smelled of overpowering jasmine perfume and insecurity. "You are violating Code 4 Section B regarding appropriate client-facing attire." I blinked. I was wearing a vintage Armani blazer, charcoal gray with pearl buttons, paired with tailored slacks and a leather tote that cost more than her car. It was the armor of a woman who closed deals. "I'm sorry." "The pearl buttons," she said, tapping the handbook with a manicured nail. "The handbook clearly states standardized closures only. And that bag, it looks distressed. We don't do distressed here. We represent excellence." The room had gone dead silent. The analysts in the glass cubicles outside had stopped typing. Junior associates were freezing mid-sip of their lattes. This is the part where I usually tell people that if you enjoy watching train wrecks in slow motion or stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, you should probably take a second to hit that follow button and upvote, because trust me, the crash is coming. But right then, nobody was moving. "Cassidy," I said, my voice dropping an octave, deadly calm. "I'm meeting with Marcus Sterling in 48 hours to finalize a $3 billion acquisition. This blazer is not the issue. The issue is that you are interrupting my preparation." She turned a shade of red that clashed with her scarf. She wasn't used to pushback. She was used to Daddy's credit card and terrified interns. "I am the Vice President's Chief of Staff," she announced, throwing a title around that I knew didn't technically exist for her pay grade. "I am enforcing standards. If you can't follow the basic rules of this company, how can we trust you with its future?" It was so absurd I almost laughed, but I saw the gleam in her eye. She didn't care about the buttons. She wanted a scalp. She wanted to prove on day one that she was the alpha predator. She had picked me because I looked established, and taking down the matriarch is the quickest way to scare the pack. "Go home, change, write a formal apology to HR for the infraction," she commanded, crossing her arms. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tremor in her hands, the desperate need for validation. I also saw the complete lack of understanding of what I actually did. "No," I said simply. "Excuse me, no. I have work to do." I turned back to the window. "You're fired," she shrieked. The words hung in the air, heavy and ridiculous. I turned back around. She was panting slightly. Eyes wide, she had committed. She had pulled the trigger. "You can't be serious," I said, not pleading but analyzing. "I am your superior by proxy and you are insubordinate," she yelled, her voice cracking. "Pack your things. Security will escort you out." Now, I looked at the terrified faces of the analysts outside the glass. I looked at the $3 billion contract on my tablet. And then a strange, cold clarity washed over me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved. "Okay," I said. Cassidy blinked, expecting a fight, expecting begging. "Okay, you're right, Cassidy," I said, snapping the cover of my tablet shut. "Standards are important. I'll pack my things immediately." I didn't wait for her response. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers, and headed for my office. She thought she had just exerted dominance. She had no idea she had just pulled the pin on a grenade that wouldn't explode for 48 hours. It had just fired the only person in the hemisphere who could interpret the handshake codes of the Sterling family. As I walked down the hall, I didn't look back. but I could feel her staring, confused by my compliance, wondering why the kill felt so empty. My office was a sanctuary of controlled chaos. Unlike the sterile minimalism of the boardroom, my desk was a landscape of stacked dossiers, legal pads filled with shorthand that only I could decipher, a Rolodex that was, ironically, the most valuable object in the entire building. Cassidy probably thought everything was digitized. She didn't understand that in the world of high-stakes mergers, the real deals were made on personal cell numbers, written on the back of cocktail napkins and business cards kept in leather binders. I didn't rush. Rushing implies guilt, or at least panic. I had neither. I opened my drawers with the slow precision of a bomb disposal technician. First, the personal items. The framed photo of my father, who had taught me that integrity is expensive, but desperation costs more. The crystal paperweight Marcus Sterling had given me after we closed the Tokyo deal 5 years ago. And then, the Rolodex. I dropped it into my distressed leather tote. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. I could see my assistant, Sarah, hovering in the doorway. She was pale, her hands twisting a tissue into confetti. "Emily," she whispered, as if speaking too loud might summon the demon in the hallway. "Is it true? Did she actually?" "It's true, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice soft. I picked up a stack of files, the preliminary due diligence for the Sterling merger. I held them for a second, weighing them. These were the company copies. Technically, they belonged here. I set them back down on the desk, right in the center. "But the merger," Sarah stammered. "The meeting is in 2 days. Nobody else knows the leverage ratios. Nobody else knows about the appendix clauses. I'm sure Cassidy is very capable," I said, and the lie tasted sweet like cyanide. "She has an MBA, Sarah. She reads the handbook." I cleared my computer history. I logged out of the encrypted server. I wiped the local cache. I wasn't destroying company property. I was simply removing my personal intellectual footprint. If they wanted to navigate the labyrinth of this deal, they would have to do it with the maps they had on file, not the shortcuts in my head. I put on my coat. It was cashmere, soft and warm against the sudden chill of the office air conditioning. I picked up my tote. When I stepped out of my office, the entire floor was pretending to work. Heads were bowed, but eyes were darting. The silence was deafening. It was the silence of a crew watching the captain being thrown overboard by a mutineer who didn't know how to read a compass. Cassidy was waiting by the elevators. She had her arms crossed, tapping her foot, flanked by 2 uncomfortable-looking security guards who knew me by name. "Make sure she didn't take any proprietary data," Cassidy snapped at them. Bob, the head of floor security, looked at me with apologetic eyes. He'd seen me work late nights for 10 years, seen me order pizza for his team during holidays. "She's clean, Miss Cassidy," Bob mumbled, not even checking my bag. Cassidy scoffed. "Fine, just get her out. I want this toxicity off my floor." I stopped in front of the elevator and pressed the button. I waited for the ding. When the door slid open, I turned to Cassidy. She was bracing for a curse, a shout, a "you'll regret this." Instead, I smiled. It was a genuine smile, kind you give someone who has unknowingly just handed you a winning lottery ticket while thinking it's a parking fine. "Thank you, Cassidy," I said, her brow furrowed. The confusion cracked her mask of arrogance for a split second. "What?" "For clarifying the priorities of this organization," I said. "It's been illuminating. Good luck with the merger. The appendices are tricky." I stepped into the elevator. "What appendices?" she demanded, stepping forward as the doors began to close. "File is complete." I saw the digital drive. "Digital drives are so impersonal," I said softly. The doors slid shut, cutting off her face just as the panic started to creep into her eyes. As the elevator descended, gravity pulled at my stomach, but my spirit soared. I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. By noon, the legal department would be asking questions. By 2:00 p.m., the partners would be confused. By tomorrow morning, the hemorrhage would begin. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunshine of the city. I didn't hail a cab. I walked 2 blocks to a quiet cafe, ordered a double espresso, and sat by the window. I took my phone out of my bag and turned it off. Let them sit in the silence for a while. I spent the afternoon at an art gallery. I stared at abstract expressionist paintings, chaos contained within frames, and felt a profound sense of kinship. It was amazing how much detail you missed in the world when you were busy carrying the weight of a billion-dollar corporation on your shoulders. For the first time in a decade, I noticed the texture of the paint, the brushstrokes, the silence. It wasn't until 6:00 p.m., when I was back in my apartment pouring a glass of Nebbiolo, that I decided to turn my phone back on. The device buzzed in my hand like an angry hornet. It didn't stop vibrating for a full 2 minutes. Screen lit up with a cascade of notifications, a digital avalanche of regret. 14 missed calls from office, Sarah, 3 missed calls from HR director, 5 missed calls from unknown number, 27 new emails. I took a sip of wine, savoring the tannins, and scrolled through the text messages. Sarah, 11:30 a.m. Emily, legal just came down. They're asking who authorized your termination. Cassidy is locked in her office. Sarah, 12:45 p.m. The partners from the Tokyo firm tried to call you. Cassidy took the call. It didn't go well. She told them you were no longer a cultural fit. There was a lot of yelling in Japanese. Sarah, 2:30 p.m. Where are the appendix files? Cassidy is screaming at it. She says you deleted them. IT says they never existed on the server. Emily, everyone is freaking out. I smiled, swirling the wine in the glass. Of course they weren't on the server. The appendix files weren't documents. They were the nuances. They were the handshake agreements regarding the retention of key staff in the acquired company. They were the verbal promises I had made to Marcus Sterling about the preservation of his family's legacy branding. They were in the notes I took by hand, the notes that were currently sitting in the fireplace of my apartment, turning into ash. I opened an email from the general counsel. David Thorne. David was a good man, but he was spineless when it came to the board. Subject, urgent, employment status/misunderstanding Emily, there seems to have been a significant breakdown in communication regarding protocol enforcement. Please call me immediately. We need to discuss a reinstatement of your contract before the Sterling meeting. We can smooth this over. Cassidy is new and perhaps overzealous. Let's not let emotions derail the merger. Emotions. I whispered to the empty room. They always called it emotions when a woman reacted, but strategy when a man did. I didn't reply. I could picture the scene at the office perfectly. The sun would be setting, casting long, accusing shadows across the open floor plan. Cassidy would be exhausted, her jasmine perfume turning stale, her white power suit wrinkled. She would be realizing that vice president's daughter was a title that commanded obedience, but not respect, certainly not knowledge. She had the files. She had the numbers. She could see the valuation is $3 billion, but she didn't know why. She didn't know that the third clause in Section 5, the one about environmental liabilities, was actually a coded negotiation about a specific plot of land in Montana that Marcus Sterling's grandfather had purchased. It looked like a liability on paper, but it was the emotional heart of the deal for the Sterling family. She tried to renegotiate that to save money, which any MBA student would do. She would insult Marcus so deeply he would walk away before the coffee was poured. I sat on my sofa and pulled a blanket over my legs. The city lights twinkled outside my window, indifferent to the panic in the glass tower downtown. Another text came through. This one was from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code. It was the private line of the Sterling Hart CFO. CFO, 7:15 p.m. Emily, pick up the phone, name your price. I looked at the message, name your price. My price wasn't money. My price was dignity. And unfortunately for them, dignity was a currency they had just devalued to zero. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I wasn't going to save them. Not tonight. Tonight, I was going to watch a movie. Maybe something about a disaster. Maybe something about a woman who walks into the sunset while the castle burns behind her. The panic was quiet from here, but I knew that by tomorrow morning, it would be screaming. There's a specific drawer in my desk at home that stays locked. It doesn't contain jewelry or cash. It contains leverage. I walked over to the antique writing desk in the corner of my living room and pulled a small brass key from underneath a decorative succulent. The lock clicked with a heavy, mechanical satisfaction. Inside, resting on velvet lining, was a single leather-bound folder. It was worn, the edges soft and frayed, smelling of old paper and tobacco smoke. Embossed on the front in faded gold leaf were the words, NDA, Legacy Protocol Sterling Family Trust. Most people thought I was hired by Sterling Hart because of my resume. The truth was, I was part of the package. 5 years ago, Marcus Sterling first considered letting outside capital touch his family empire. He had one condition. He wanted a liaison who understood old money. Not the loud, flashy wealth of tech billionaires, but the quiet, guarded wealth that moves in centuries, not quarters. My father had been Marcus's father's attorney. I grew up playing hide-and-seek in the library of the Sterling estate, while the men smoked cigars and discussed trust funds. I wasn't just an employee. I was the bridge. I was the translator between the cold, predatory capitalism of my current firm and the feudal loyalty of the Sterling family. I opened the binder. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a direct private number. It wasn't a business line. It was the number to the phone Marcus kept in his breast pocket. I sat there for a long time, tracing the numbers with my finger. Calling this number was the nuclear option. Breached every confidentiality clause in my employment contract. It was professional suicide. But then I remembered Cassidy's face. I remembered the way she looked at my blazer like it was a contagion. I remembered the smugness of her firing me in front of the people I had mentored. I picked up my cell phone. I dialed the number. It rang twice. This is Marcus. The voice was deep, gravelly, and instantly familiar. It's Emily, I said. There was a pause. A shift in the airwaves. Emily, I thought we were in a quiet period until the signing on Friday. We were, I said, keeping my voice steady. But the parameters have changed. Changed how? The warmth drained from his voice, replaced by the steel of a man who owned shipping fleets. I've been terminated, I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. It lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Terminated, he repeated, the word sounding foreign in his mouth. By whom? The board. The SEC find something? No, I said. By the new vice president's chief of staff. A dress code violation, and a misalignment of culture. A dress code violation, Marcus said flatly. Yes, and who is handling the transition of the Montana assets? Nobody, I said. Cassidy, the new chief of staff, believes the files on the server are sufficient. I heard a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a growl. Files on the server listed the Montana property as non-revenue generating acreage. Without your addendum, the algorithm will flag it for liquidation within 6 months. Correct, I said. So, they fired the only person who knows where the bodies are buried, and they did it 2 days before the biggest merger in their history. That appears to be the situation. Emily, Marcus said, and his voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Are you free for breakfast tomorrow? I'm unemployed, Marcus. I'm free all day. Good, meet me at the Pierre. 8:00 a.m. And Emily, yes, don't sign anything with them. Not a severance package, not an NDA extension. Nothing. I wouldn't dream of it. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy drum in my chest. I had just crossed the Rubicon. I wasn't just a fired employee anymore. I was an active combatant. I closed the leather binder and locked the drawer. The apartment felt different now. It wasn't a refuge anymore, it was a war room. The Pierre Hotel serves breakfast with the kind of hushed efficiency that makes you feel like you're plotting a coup, which, in a way, we were. Marcus Sterling looked exactly as he always did, immaculate in a navy suit, silver hair swept back, eyes that had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. We didn't discuss the weather. We didn't discuss the menu. They called my team this morning, Marcus said, buttering a piece of toast with surgical precision. Oh, I sipped my tea. Yes, a woman named Cassidy. She sounded breathless. Marcus paused, a flicker of amusement dancing in his eyes. She told my lead counsel that you were unavailable due to a sudden medical emergency. She said you were hospitalized with severe exhaustion, but had fully briefed her on the deal. I set my cup down. The audacity was breathtaking. It wasn't just a lie, it was a verifiable, dangerous lie. If I was sick, the deal could be delayed legally. If I was fired, the key man clause in the contract, which stated that key personnel changes must be disclosed immediately, would trigger a voiding of the exclusivity agreement. She's trying to buy time, I said. She thinks if she can get you in the room, she can charm her way through the Montana clauses. She thinks I'm an idiot, Marcus corrected. She thinks I'm a checkbook with legs, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. My assistant, James, did a little digging. Apparently, HR is currently in a standoff with this Cassidy. The board wasn't notified of your termination until this morning. The CFO is reportedly throwing staplers. That sounds like him, I noted. Here is the situation, Emily, Marcus leaned in. I don't do business with amateurs, and I certainly don't do business with liars. The deal with Sterling Hart is dead. I'm going to kill it, but, he let the word hang there. But I still need to sell, and I still want you to run the transition. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. It wasn't a merger agreement. It was a consultancy contract. My holding company is looking for director of strategic acquisitions. The salary is double what you were making. The equity is significant. And the first assignment is to find a new buyer for my company. Looked at the contract. It was freedom. It was power. It was the ultimate revenge. There's just one thing, Marcus added, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. I haven't canceled the meeting at your old office yet. It's scheduled for tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Why not? Because I want to see her face when she tries to explain why the hospitalized liaison is sitting on the other side of the table. I felt a cold shiver of anticipation. Want me to come to the meeting? No, Marcus shook his head. I want you to be in the lobby. I want you to be the last thing she sees before her career evaporates. I'll handle the meeting. You just handle the exit. My phone buzzed again on the table. It was an automated alert from the Sterling Hart server. My access credentials had been officially revoked. But then, a second alert. A news notification. Market rumors swirl. Sterling Hart merger facing procedural delays as key exec rumored to exit. The leak had sprung. The sharks were circling. I accept, I said to Marcus, picking up the pen. Good, he said. Now, finish your eggs. You're going to need your strength. Watching an empire crumble is exhausting work. Later that afternoon, I walked past the Sterling Hart building. I stayed on the other side of the street, hidden behind oversized sunglasses. I could see the activity on the 42nd floor through the glass walls. Figures were pacing. Lights were blazing. It looked like an ant colony that had just been kicked. I checked my email on my personal phone. There was one last desperate message from Cassidy herself. Emily, please call me, we can fix this. I didn't mean it, it was a stress reaction. My father is asking questions. Please, I deleted it. There are no takebacks in the big leagues, Cassidy. You read the handbook. Should have read the room. The morning of the meeting, the sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain. It matched the mood I imagined was permeating the executive suite across the street. I sat in the corner booth of the Grind, a coffee shop directly opposite the main entrance of the Sterling Hart Tower. It was 8:30 a.m. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. I wasn't alone. James, Marcus's personal assistant, man who looked like he was carved out of marble and dressed by Tom Ford, sat across from me. We had a stack of documents on the table. They were the onboarding papers for my new role at Sterling Holdings. Marcus is en route, James said, checking his watch. He's currently 5 minutes away. He asked me to ensure you were visible. Visible? I asked. To the tower, James gestured discreetly toward the glass skyscraper across the street. I looked up. Floor-ceiling windows of the lobby were clear. And there, pacing back and forth near the security desk, was a figure in a white suit. Cassidy. She looked frantic. She was yelling at a receptionist, gesturing wildly at the elevators. She was trying to ensure everything was perfect for Marcus's arrival. She wanted to look like the gatekeeper. Then she stopped. She looked out the window. At first, she just scanned the street. Then her gaze locked on the coffee shop. Distance was about 50 yards, but I saw her freeze. She saw me. And more importantly, she saw James. She knew James, everyone knew James. He was the harbinger of Marcus Sterling, and he was sitting with me, laughing, handing me a pen. I saw Cassidy press her face against the glass. Her mouth opened. She grabbed her phone and started dialing. My phone remained silent. I had blocked her number an hour ago. She sees us, I said, taking a sip of my cappuccino. Excellent, James said without turning around. Let her sweat. Panic makes people sloppy, and Marcus hates sloppy. I watched her crumble in real time. She turned to the receptionist, pointing at us, likely screaming something about spies or sabotage. The receptionist just shook her head, looking terrified. Cassidy spun around, running toward the elevators, likely rushing back up to the 42nd floor to warn. Well, to warn who? Father? The board? What could she say? The woman I fired for wearing the wrong buttons is currently having coffee with the buyer's right-hand man. It was an admission of catastrophic failure. She's running back upstairs, I reported. James nodded. She's going to try to intercept the narrative. Too late. The narrative left the building yesterday with your box of personal effects. James gathered the papers. You're officially signed, Emily. Welcome to the family. Now, per Marcus's instructions, are to wait here for exactly 20 minutes. Then, cross the street and enter the lobby. Just stand there, be the ghost at the feast, and Marcus, he's pulling up now. I looked out the window. A sleek black town car glided to the curb in front of the tower. The driver opened the door, and Marcus Sterling stepped out. He buttoned his jacket, checked his cufflinks, and looked up at the building with the expression of a demolition expert examining a condemned structure. Didn't look at the coffee shop. He walked straight into the lion's den. Showtime, James whispered. I watched Marcus enter the revolving doors. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Cassidy would be scrambling down from the 42nd floor, out of breath, sweaty, trying to compose herself. She would meet him with a lie, and he would meet her with the truth. I waited. 1 minute, 5 minutes. 10. The rain started to fall, blurring the glass, turning the world into a watercolor painting of gray and steel. But I saw everything clearly. I paid for the coffee. I checked my reflection in the window. My blazer was perfect. My distressed tote bag was on my shoulder. It was time to go say hello. The lobby of the Sterling Hart building was designed to intimidate. 3 stories of marble, a waterfall that cost more than my college tuition, and acoustics that amplified every footstep, pushed through the revolving doors, and the sound of the waterfall washed over me. The air was cool. The scene played out like a tableau vivant. Marcus Sterling was standing in the center of the atrium, near the security turnstiles. He wasn't moving toward the elevators. He was standing like a statue. Cassidy was there. She must have sprinted down the service stairs because she was slightly disheveled, her white suit looking less power and more panic. She was flanked by the CFO and the general counsel, who both looked like they wanted to be invisible. I walked quietly across the marble floor. My heels clicked, a rhythmic, steady sound that cut through the white noise of the water. I stopped about 20 feet away, close enough to hear, far enough to watch. Unforeseen complications, Cassidy was saying, her voice shrill, bouncing off the hard surfaces. But as I said, Emily is indisposed. She's in the hospital. Want to worry you with the details. Marcus stared at her. He didn't blink. In the hospital, he repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Yes, Cassidy nodded vigorously, very sudden, but she briefed me fully. I am ready to proceed with the signing. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once. That's strange, Marcus said, because I just received a text from her. She says the coffee across the street was excellent. Cassidy froze. The blood drained from her face so fast she looked like a wax figure. The CFO's head snapped up. What? The CFO croaked. Marcus turned slightly, scanning the lobby. His eyes landed on me. He didn't smile, he just nodded. Cassidy turned. She saw me standing there, healthy, calm, holding my tote bag, the hospitalized invalid. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. She, Cassidy stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's lying. She must have. I fired her. The truth vomited out of her before she could stop it. The CFO turned on Cassidy, his eyes bulging. You did what? Marcus looked back at Cassidy. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. You told my legal team she was sick. You lied to me, to my board, and to your own partners. And you fired the project lead 48 hours before closing for. He looked me up and down. For what, exactly? She violated dress code. Cassidy shrieked, desperate, cornered. Her buttons, her bag, it's in the handbook. Marcus laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. You fired the architect of a $3 billion deal over buttons. He turned to the CFO. Is this the leadership I'm buying? Is this the judgment I'm investing in? Mr. Sterling, please. The CFO stepped forward, hands raised. This is a misunderstanding. Cassidy is. She's new. We can bring Emily back. Can reinstate her immediately with a bonus. Marcus raised a hand. No, he turned to me. Emily, are you employed by this company? I stepped forward. No, Mr. Sterling. My employment was terminated for cause effective Tuesday morning. Then you have no authority to negotiate. None whatsoever. Marcus turned back to the group. He looked at Cassidy, who was now trembling, tears welling in her eyes. Then there is no one here I trust to sign this paper, Marcus said. He signaled to James, who was standing by the door. The meeting is off. You can't, Cassidy screamed. My father will sue, we have a term sheet. Term sheets are contingent on due diligence and good faith, Marcus said, his voice ice cold. You have demonstrated neither. He turned on his heel. Good day. The moment the revolving door spun shut behind Marcus Sterling, the lobby exploded. It wasn't a physical explosion. The psychological blast wave was just as violent. The CFO, a man named Henderson who had survived 3 hostile takeovers and a federal audit, turned on Cassidy with a face the color of a ripe plum. You fired her, Henderson roared. The acoustics of the lobby amplified his rage into a thunderclap. You fired the liaison, without consulting legal, without consulting the board. She was insubordinate. Cassidy cried, shrinking back against the security desk. It was disrespectful. I am the VP's chief of staff. You're a liability. Henderson shouted, spittle flying. Do you have any idea what you just did? That was $3 billion walking out the door. That was our stock price. That was my pension. Security guards were looking at their shoes. Receptionists were pretending to type on dead keyboards. I stood there, an observer to the carnage. Cassidy looked around wildly for an ally. Her eyes landed on me. Hate in them was toxic, but it was mixed with a terrifying realization that she had dug her own grave. This is your fault, she screamed at me. You set me up, you planned this. I plan to wear a blazer, I said calmly, my voice cutting through her hysteria. You plan the rest, Cassidy. Henderson spun toward me. Emily, please, ignore her. She's suspended, effective immediately. He glared at Cassidy. Get out of my sight. Go to your father's office and wait there. Don't speak to anyone. If you tweet, if you text, I will sue you personally for breach of fiduciary duty. Cassidy let out a sob, a jagged, ugly sound, and ran toward the elevators, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. Henderson took a breath and composed himself, turning a desperate, plastic smile toward me. Emily, okay, the damage is bad, but it's not irreversible. We can call Marcus back. We'll tell him it's fixed. You're rehired. Senior VP, 20% raise. Stock options, just pick up the phone. Fix this. I looked at Henderson. I had worked for him for 10 years. He had never once asked about my family. He had never once said thank you when I saved a quarter's earnings with a clever negotiation. He only cared now because the ship was sinking. I can't do that, Bob, I said. Why not? Name your number. We'll double it. It's not about the number, I said. I reached into my tote bag, distressed leather one that Cassidy hated so much, and pulled out a sleek, cream-colored envelope. What is that? Henderson asked. My resignation letter, I lied. It wasn't. It was the onboarding packet for Sterling Holdings, but he didn't need to know that, or rather, my formal acknowledgement of termination. You can't rehire me. Why? Because I've already accepted a new position. Henderson's face went slack. Who? Who could possibly hire you this fast? The client, I said. Realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back a step. You're working for Sterling? As of this morning, I said. I'm the director of strategic acquisitions, which means, Bob, that if you want to salvage any part of this deal, maybe sell off the parts for scrap, you'll be negotiating with me. I checked my watch. But not today. Today, I'm going to go buy a new blazer. This one has bad memories. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Henderson shouting into his phone, calling the CEO, calling the lawyers, calling God, but nobody was going to answer. The line was dead. 3 days later, the stock of Sterling Heart had dropped 18%. The rumor mill was churning out stories about internal management crises and failed leadership. In a desperate bid to stop the bleeding, the board had begged Marcus Sterling for one last meeting. They promised that the obstacles had been removed, promised that the deal could be restructured. They begged him to come to the table. Marcus agreed on one condition. The entire executive team, including the vice president and his daughter, had to be present to apologize. The boardroom was packed. The air conditioning was on full blast, but everyone was sweating. Cassidy sat at the far end of the table, looking small. Her white suit was gone, replaced by a drab gray dress. Her father, the VP, wouldn't even look at her. Doors opened. Marcus walked in, followed by James, and then me. I walked in last. I was wearing a new suit, black, sharp, with gold buttons. A collective gasp went around the room. Cassidy's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. We believed, the CEO began, his voice shaking, that this meeting was to discuss the reinstatement of the merger. Marcus sat down at the head of the table. He didn't open his briefcase. He simply folded his hands. "I'm not here to merge," Marcus said. "I'm here to make an offer for the assets. At 30 cents on the dollar." 30 cents, the CFO shouted. "That's robbery. We were at 3 billion. That was the price when you had competent leadership," Marcus said calmly. "That was the price when you had Emily. Now you have chaos." He gestured to me. "Emily is now advising me on the true value of your portfolio. She tells me that without the Montana transition, the environmental risk is catastrophic. She tells me that the Tokyo partners have lost faith. She tells me the company is hollow." The room turned to look at me. The betrayal in their eyes was palpable. They expected loyalty from the person they had discarded. "Emily," Cassidy whispered. "How could you? You worked here for 15 years. I looked at her. I didn't feel hate anymore. I felt pity. She was a child playing with matches who was surprised the house burned down. I did," I said. "And for 15 years, I followed the code. I dressed the part. I played the game. And you decided it wasn't enough." The VP spoke up. "We can fix this. Emily, come back. We'll fire Cassidy. We'll give you her job. Just tell him to sign the original deal." The room held its breath. This was it, the offer of redemption, the return to the fold. I could have my old life back, but with a crown on my head. I looked at Marcus. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. "You ready to sign?" he asked, playing along. I looked at the CEO. I looked at the CFO. And finally, I looked at Cassidy. I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried because she's the one holding the shovel. "Sorry," I said softly, my voice echoing in the silent room. "She fired me." "No deal." Marcus stood up. "You heard the lady. The offer is 30 cents on the dollar. You have until 5 p.m. to accept, or we wait for the bankruptcy auction and buy it for 10. Turned and walked out. I followed him. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. The silence behind me said it all. As we walked to the elevator, Marcus handed me a file. "Good work, director," he said. I took the file. "Thank you, Marcus." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, and for the first time in 15 years, I didn't check the mirror to see if my buttons were straight. I knew they were perfect. We went down, leaving the wreckage on the 42nd floor, and I finally, truly exhaled. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.